right. Hey there, everyone. I'm Colin, and welcome back to the Product Uncensored show. This is the show where we talk about all things product with product people focusing on Southeast Asia. At least we try to do that most of the time. We're at episode 2 today, and if this is your first time on the show, do check out our episode, the first episode on YouTube, which I will link at the end, and I will also put in the description. Please note that we also have podcasts available for the shows, so please find them over on Anchor or on Spotify. And if you have enjoyed our shows so far, please give us a like or subscribe, and please do it now because I know that you will forget after the show is over. Now, on today's show, I have another special guest. He's a very well-journeyed elder statesman in the product management scene and someone that I have come to respect a lot. He's none other than Ken Chin. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Hi, Colin. Great to be here.
Yes, and you are over in the UK, right?
Yeah, so I just got back to London a few weeks ago.
Very nice. How's the weather there?
It's absolutely beautiful. I live in the Twickenham area, and because of the lockdown, there's hardly any aeroplanes from Heathrow going back and forth. So you can hear the birds chirping, and it's really nice out here.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I didn't call you on the show to talk about the birds, so let's talk about product stuff. So let's start with your CV, right? Your CV is way too decorated, way too accomplished for us to go through in detail. But one of the things that really stood out to me is that you've been stationed in at least 4 countries now, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Australia, Singapore, UK, Malaysia.
Yeah,
Did I miss out anyone? All right. So
I spent quite a bit of time in Silicon Valley as well, but I wasn't living there. I was just visiting during my eBay day.
Okay, yeah. We'll get into your eBay days soon enough. But yeah, for the listeners, this is the OG right here, Ken Chin. He's the man. So let's start with your product journey, right? How did you end up in product management? Because I believe that you didn't start off your career in product management, right?
No, yeah. My journey into product was a complete accident, probably like most people.
Yeah.
But I actually started off my career in software engineering, right? So I did computer science at university. So yeah, I started off life actually writing code. I'm going to show you how old I am. I used to write code for IBM mainframe computers back in the day, right? So,
seriously, because my first job in the bank, I actually did mainframe administration using RecF on the ZOS.
I was using a IBM MVS system. This archaic, languages.
Was it called the OS 390 or was it something like that?
I don't even remember anymore.
Anyway, sorry. So yeah, please continue.
Yeah, so I sort of split my career into my pre-eBay days and my post-eBay career. Up until eBay, I was, working in Singapore as a software developer for a couple of years, went back to Perth, Australia. I went into an Apple store, tried to buy a Mac, and they gave me a job instead. So I worked for Apple for a couple of years as an account manager. I finally decided I was going to start my own digital media agency, not because I wanted to start a business, but because I love digital media. This is in the mid-90s. Stuff was still basically on CD-ROM at the time. But there were no other companies that were, willing to employ me. They just didn't exist. So I had to start my own. Okay. So that was in the mid-90s. And then in 2000, I realized that, hey, this thing called the internet is absolutely taking off. And Perth, Australia is not the best place to be in terms of, the center of the world for the internet. So at that point, I decided to move to Sydney, Australia. And I worked for a large travel company for 5 years, setting up all of their e-commerce and intranets, internal systems, and all of their, travel booking systems. So I was there in Sydney for 5 years. And then that's where I joined eBay. Joined eBay for a couple of years in the Sydney office. Actually, initially not as a product manager. I was actually in a business management role first. I was category manager, then marketing manager, then motors category manager. And then that's when I thought, hey, there's an opportunity to become a product manager. I had never heard of the role product management before, right? So it was a great opportunity for me, and it brought together all of my technical skills, all of the kind of business management skills, as well as, you know, just being in the digital space. So it was a great opportunity for me, and I've loved it ever since.
So, did you apply for the role, or were you sort of offered the role? Were you pushed into the role when you
Uh,
switched in eBay?
yeah, so I was looking around, and then I was talking to a couple of employment and recruitment agencies, and then one of them just suggested, "Hey, have you heard of this company called eBay?" Right? They had just launched in Australia about a year and a half, you know, before. They were looking to grow the team. So I jumped at the opportunity, right?
Right.
eBay was the first company that I joined where people knew more than I did. You know, up until that point, it was in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Right?
Okay.
But at eBay, I met people who really knew their shit.
Okay. And I believe that you were in the Sydney office. Then after that, you went to the UK office. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, I had the opportunity to move to the London office. They needed some product managers there. Yeah, so you know, if you grow up in Perth, Australia, and somebody offers you the opportunity to move to London, you don't say no to that. You would regret it for the rest of your life. So
You make
I packed
Perth
up stamps and
sounds
I moved over.
yeah, you make Perth sound so bad.
There are two types of people from Perth, right? There are the people who live there and never leave, and the other people, people like me, they get out as soon as they can and they never come back.
Oh boy. All right. Don't throw any hate at me. You know, I'm just a messenger. So yeah. But
That's the way it is in Perth.
but if you have any experiences in Perth, especially in product management and in tech, yeah, do put your comments as well, because I think or email me or something like that. I'll be really, really keen to see whether anyone has had an experience that's different from Ken. But all right, let's fast forward a little bit. So you came to Asia in 2017, is that right?
Yeah, early 2017. Yeah,
Yeah. And you took up a job in Malaysia with Seek Asia.
that's right. So I was recruited in as the chief product officer for Seek Asia. So if you don't know much about Seek Asia, it's an employment marketplace. So it's a two-sided marketplace. You'll find that many two-sided marketplaces have similar dynamics. So it's actually, you know, not too different from eBay. Instead of buyers and sellers, you've got, you know, candidates and hirers.
Yeah.
And then it's based in KL. Well, my role was based in KL, but actually we have quite a large development center in Hong Kong and Shenzhen as well. And then the company itself operates across, you know, 7 markets throughout Southeast Asia and Hong Kong as well.
Okay. So for the Malaysian listeners, right, Seek Asia, I believe, was previously known as JobStreet. And
Correct.
then it got bought over by the Seek Group, which is, I think, the number one recruitment platform in, is it the world, or is it just in
Australia?
In Australia.
It's certainly
Okay.
one of the largest in the world
Okay.
in terms of market capitalization.
Yeah.
But there's actually 2 companies that came together to form Seek Asia. So one of them is jobstreet.com, which was based out of KL. And the other one is JobsDB, which is actually based in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And prior to the merger of those 2 companies, they were fierce competitors. You know, they hated each other. So bringing these 2 companies together to become one was, you know, quite a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's start a little bit of when you started, right? So why did you decide to join Seek Asia? Because you had already by that time, you know, in your own words, you'd left the boringness of Perth. You've gone to the bright lights of UK. You even spent time in the Silicon Valley. Why would you come to a small country like Malaysia, where, you know, tech isn't exactly, you know, the most vibrant?
Yeah, so a lot of planets aligned for this role, right? So my parents are Malaysian. That's a start, right? So from you know, knowing the country, knowing the culture, having friends and family around, you know, that was really easy for me. Love the food. Can't get away from
Booyah.
that. Oh yeah. The second thing, the role itself was really interesting, right? So I'd never been at the C-suite before, so the chief product officer role was really interesting for me. I really wanted to own the product vision and the product strategy. but I also wanted to own the way that product was run and operated, right? So I had a great partner in terms of the CTO, Dan. He and I look at things the same way in terms of how we run teams and how we want to run products. So that was
and he's Australian too, right? So that helps, right?
He's also Australian as well. Yep, but he's more Malaysian than I am. He's been in Malaysia for a long time.
That is true.
So Dan was a great partner to have in that company.
Mm-hmm.
It was regional, it wasn't a single country market. It was, across 7 markets in Asia. So that was interesting. And because of this merger of the two competitive companies together, there was a lot of transformation that was required. So I'd been part of transformations before, and I've been part of the leadership team in different organizations when a transformation has happened. I've consulted to it when I was at BCG as well. And I think I really just wanted to sort of lead a transformation and have that experience of doing it the right way and doing it well.
Okay. So in that sense, what was the state of the Seek Asia product team? If you could sort of give a summary. And also the follow-up question to that would be, what were your first decisions as the Chief Product Officer of Seek Asia?
Yeah, so the state that I found it was, it was still in that post-merger state, right? So the teams had come together, but they were still working on separate platforms, right? Because there was still the JobStreet platform and the JobsDB platform. So the teams were still, although they were part of a single structure, they were essentially working on their own platforms, right? And there was still a lot of post-merger work that needed to be done in terms of aligning things, pay, performance management, a whole bunch of sort of operational processes. And then the biggest challenge, I think, was that, different markets were under pressure. The competitive pressure had increased. Different markets were at different stages of maturity. And then we had 2 legacy platforms to deal with, right? So there was the JobStreet platform and the JobsDB platform. Both had been around for, around 20 years when I joined. So there was a lot of legacy technology. And the rate of innovation and the rate of product delivery had suffered because a lot of technical debt had been allowed to accumulate.
So what did you do then? What were your first few decisions? Like, what did you have to do? So you were talking about like salaries that you were looking at and things like that. But from a product practice standpoint, from a product team perspective of now having, JobsDB and JobStreet together under one entity, what did you have to do as the CPO to sort of, get the wheels moving?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that I looked at was the team, right? You have to do a fairly harsh assessment of the team. And I think because Asia is a less mature market, just in terms of technology, the expectations of people are a little bit lower, right? And so raising the expectations of performance and what skills they need to bring to the job, how they do things, the way they think about problems, and the way they look at innovation. All the bar had to be raised in terms of the teams. So that was a difficult process. There were some great people in the organization already, and then there were some other people who, after you assess them for a while, you think, are they going to be able to achieve the level of competency and performance that you would expect them for that level of role, right? So working with the team, coaching them, training them, having to manage some people out, and then hiring new people in was a big part of my role in the first year. But we also did quite a large restructure of the product delivery team as well. So the PD organization is roughly 200 people, including all of the engineers, PMs, designers, data people. So we structured a transformation program that took over, just over a year to roll out. And we essentially recruited people from the organization into a new team structure where each team had a very well-defined domain within the product, so that they could focus and get really deep in terms of the metrics, the performance, understanding customers' needs in that part of the product.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was quite a large organizational transformation that happened as well.
Okay. And from the product itself, not the team, but from the product or the platform itself, what was the main remit when you first joined? Was it to build new features? Was it to re-platform? What was that remit like?
The remit was a negotiation, right? So I worked with the CEO, Suresh. We had a reasonably well-defined, prioritization process. So in the same way that an agile team would have a prioritization and of a backlog, we had a very similar sort of process at the enterprise level, where we had an enterprise backlog, and we would look at all of the key strategic projects and initiatives that needed to go ahead, and we would discuss and debate. Should we be doing this now? Should we be doing it later? What is the relative priority of each of these things at a high level? Mm-hmm. And we would also include things like platform stability in there as well. So there were a number of teams that were much more focused on the enterprise backlog, but then we also had a set of teams that were really there just to work on the existing product, like just making sure that the product actually worked well, that it was performant, and then starting to improve the existing product as well. So there was a bit of a balance between those two.
Okay. And how many product managers did you have? Slash product owners. I'm not sure what the structure was like there, but how many product people did you have under you?
Yeah. So I had a few different teams reporting into me. I had the product managers reporting into me. I also had responsibility for the design team, as well as the analytics team when I first joined as well. Later on, we actually moved the analytics team into its own group under a new leader, because we wanted to have a greater focus on both data analytics and data science and data engineering. So we pulled all of those people together to make that work. So I was left with product management and design, and they were about 15 to 17 people each in each of those two teams. So that's the size of the team that was reporting up to me.
Okay, fantastic. So I want to go back a little bit to something that you mentioned, right? Because you were saying that, there was this relatively, I can't remember the word they used. I think it was mature prioritization process. And this is an interesting question that I think would be good for the listeners to understand as well. Did you use the same kind of prioritization techniques that you learn in product management to take it over into, your management or your board meetings as well? What did you use in terms of prioritization?
Yeah, well, look, it's actually a very similar process, right? Maybe the level of documentation is a little bit higher because you need to, present it convincingly as to, what are each of these projects or strategic initiatives, and then different people would be contributing things to that backlog as well. So it's not just my backlog. I'm responsible for prioritizing it and ensuring that we have agreement across the leadership team about that prioritization. But we would have initiatives from the strategy team or sales and ops contributing projects to that list as well, right? So it might be a pricing project. It might be a new set of features for a new set of customers. It could be something like replacing a legacy experience. In fact, that was one of our key focus areas over time was trying to look at how do we build a new customer experience for the candidate side of the marketplace, because those experiences had become a bit stale over time. Old technology stacks, fairly limited sort of UX. So how do you provide a great new experience in each of our markets, starting with our most competitive market in Hong Kong. And then sort of moving on from there. So it's very similar prioritization to anyone in a normal agile team.
Okay. And when, as a sort of organization, were you guys using OKRs, KPIs, or was it something else to sort of measure the effectiveness of the product tech or the product delivery team?
Yeah, so we have key metrics at a high level for the business, but then we also have key metrics at the team level for each team and each domain. And then on top of that, we have OKRs. So we use OKRs as a way to provide guidance and direction to the teams. It can be quite a painful process to actually define what OKRs are, but I think once you've got them defined, then the team has incredible clarity on what exactly they need to do, right? And it's not about activities. OKRs need to be written about objectives. What is the customer objective that we're trying to achieve, and how do we measure that effectively? So once you've defined OKRs, then it becomes much easier to give that team the autonomy that it wants in order to achieve the business objectives.
Okay, so here's the question that is actually, I've read it like multiple times and a lot of people are asking it. And as usual, I love to poke holes and sort of try and understand in real life how this works, right? So OKRs are supposed to be aspirational and in that sense, always just a little bit out of reach to stretch yourself. And then the other ideal about OKR is that you're not supposed to measure the achievements of the teams using OKR. So it's not supposed to be used as the way to actually do your performance reviews. Yeah. So what's your experience with how did you do that?
It's a little bit mixed. I have to be honest, right? So in theory, like it shouldn't be used for performance reviews, and yes, they should be aspirational. I think we got the aspirational bit right. They were always, stretch goals, quite ambitious, but I didn't penalize people for not achieving 100%, right? You only expect them to achieve, 60, 70%.
As it should be, right?
Right. So that's the expectation of, how they should achieve OKRs. It's hard to not factor that into performance reviews, right? Because so much of how you measure people is about also not only what they achieve, but how they do it. So on the what they achieve, it's hard, you can write separate goals for that, but they end up being very similar to OKRs, right? And then on the behaviors side, how they get things done, that's a separate conversation. That's more about culture and behaviors.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that, in the implementation of, or rather in your journey of using OKRs within your organization, were you able to achieve that ideal of like totally separating it?
No, I would say not. No. We tried to keep it separate. So we try to follow the principles of keeping it separate.
Yeah.
But often when you're talking about, so what did you achieve? People would talk about their OKRs, right? Because that is what they are focused on in terms of achievement. So, in theory it sounds great, but in practice it was very difficult to separate out those two.
Okay. But okay, so then let's flip to the other side of OKRs. Then OKRs are supposed to help organizations, all sort of align together with where they're going. Do you feel that OKRs helped you to do that as an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a very good attribute of OKRs is that once they're written, you can get good alignment across teams, but also good alignment and agreement with the leadership team as well. Right, because OKRs would normally be written on a quarterly basis, and we would review them not only with the team but also with the leadership team as well. So that means you've got good a good alignment across what people are expecting teams to achieve. It also brings complexity in terms of negotiating those OKRs in the first place, because you do need to get that alignment. But I think it's a forcing mechanism for organizational alignment. That's why they're so good, right? It forces that conversation to happen.
All right, fantastic. All right, so let's close the chapter on OKR. I want to sort of move on to the other aspects of your time with Seek. So one of the things as well, given that this show focuses on products in Southeast Asia, obviously, what did you find about, or rather, what was your experience with dealing or doing product management in Asia?
Well, it is different, right? A lot of the principles are the same, but the execution of them has to change, right? Because it's all situational. It's all based on the circumstances of the maturity of the teams and the individuals that are in your teams, the competitive situation that you're in, the pressure that you're under in order to achieve things, and then just the dynamics of the product delivery organization with other parts of the business, with marketing, with operations. There are different dynamics within the business as well, and different levels of maturity within different parts of the business. Mm-hmm. So working in Asia, I did find a couple of things. There does tend to be some cultural traits which are quite different. And I actually spoke about this at one of my conference presentations a couple of years ago.
This would be MTP, right? MTP.
Yeah, Mind the Product. The first one here in Asia was in Singapore a couple of years ago. And, some of the things that I mentioned there is that you do tend to see some cultural traits in Asia, which are quite different to what you would find in the West, right? In Australia or Europe or the US. And one of them is this sort of cultural trait of conflict avoidance, right? You generally find that people don't. I'm not sure exactly why. It's potentially a cultural thing, but it's also perhaps just not having good practice at it. But people tend not to speak up, mm-hmm. right? If I was doing a large team meeting in London, for example, at the end of the meeting, there would be lots of questions. Everybody would be asking questions, trying to find clarity about what we just discussed. In Asia, you might get a few questions, usually from the same people, and then it becomes like dead silence. Right.
Yes, so that inevitable awkward silence, right? Any questions?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to go, start doing things like, okay, I'm going to look for volunteers or something like that, just to get people's creative juices flowing.
Exactly. But if you've got a question in your head but you don't ask it, that's a wasted opportunity, because probably half the room has exactly the same question, right? So I generally find that the people who are a little bit more, confident, they're not afraid to speak out. They tend to take leadership roles because they do find clarity. They do go seeking clarity, so that when they do achieve things, it's exactly what you're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry. Then the follow-up question to that is: so given that this sort of trait seems to be more prevalent in Asia than, let's say, in other Western countries, for example, what mm-hmm. would then be your advice for someone who, let's say, would say, I'm a more introverted product manager, or I'm the quieter sort in that sense? I'm trying very hard not to use the labels or generalize, but yeah, for those kinds of product managers, what would your advice be?
Yeah, look, there's a few things that I've found quite good at overcoming some of those inhibitions, right? To set some context, though, I am actually an introvert. If I do my Myers-Briggs scores, I'm highly introverted. But I've trained myself to be extrovert, and I have a battery that lasts about somewhere between 13 and 16 hours, right? Where I can be an extrovert, I can talk to people, and then I curl up into a little ball and I don't want to talk to anyone, right? and if you're all in that same sort of place, like you're a little bit shy, a bit introverted, then you just need to get out there and actually practice. Practice in a safe environment. It could be within the work environment itself. So you could be doing lunch bag, learning sessions, just with your team or with a few teams where you're presenting something. You're telling them about the latest engineering framework or the latest design framework or whatever it might be. You could do it outside of the workplace as well. So one thing that I've advised people to do is go and sing karaoke. It's a great way of building confidence, right? So in terms of, gearing up to being the focal point of some group of people, and having some confidence to actually perform, karaoke is actually not a bad way to do that. You're in a friendly environment. It's kind of fun. No one's really serious. There's a lot of alcohol. It's actually quite a safe way of, getting up and presenting and performing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was also mentoring another PM based in Hong Kong. Instead of karaoke, she did poetry recital. Right. Which was also another great way. Or you could do a more traditional thing, like, some of those groups where they actually help you present. I forgot what it's called now.
Spoken word?
Yes. Yeah, there's a few groups like that. I can't remember.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, very interesting. So for those of you, because, and the reason why I brought this up was because people have asked these questions before. Like, does this mean that if you are less vocal, you are quieter, that means there is no future for you as a product leader? And I think you've answered that very well. So that's fantastic. But so moving along that line, right? So when you hire, especially in Asia, when you hire, what are you looking for in terms of, let's say a product leader? Let's talk about product leaders, I think, because in terms of being junior, I think as long as you show potential, that's usually a great way to get in. But let's talk about what you look for in product leaders, especially when you were in Asia.
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about product leaders, I am thinking about how well they're going to perform under pressure, because, the more senior you get as a product manager, and as you move into leadership roles, your stakeholders just become bigger and meaner, right? They don't go away. they just keep getting bigger, right? So you have to be able to deal with those sorts of situations. So communication is absolutely necessary. Influence is actually a really big part of being a product manager, a senior product manager, and a product leader as well, right? So can you influence people? Can you convince them of a certain path? Can you negotiate that path? Do you have a bit of a strategic mind as well? So can you see the broader picture and from a bigger perspective, right? So in general, there's very broad generalization. As you become more senior as a product leader, the aperture that you see starts to open up. When you're a junior product manager, it might be just a few user stories. Then as a product manager, it becomes your team. Maybe it then extends to a whole domain, and then the whole product. And then you move to the whole company. And then you might move to your aperture being the entire marketplace, right? You need to be aware of all of the new competitors that are coming to try and eat your lunch, different business models. And that's where strategy starts to play a bigger role as well. So there's the managing other people and stakeholders part. There's a lot of behaviors in there that I look for. The ability to resolve conflicts effectively, ability to communicate, influence, those kinds of things. Then there's, on top of all of the standard product management capabilities and competencies you would expect, there's that broadening of the aperture. Can you think a bit more strategically about, why we're doing this? What is the value proposition that we're trying to deliver to customers? Mm-hmm. Who are the customers? Is this the right marketplace that we're in? Yeah, so those elements start to become much more important. I think there's a third one as well, which is around people management, right? So as you become more senior in general, you may start to actually have people reporting into you as well.
Yes.
So can you also be a great people manager? And from that perspective, there's a great book, which is Radical Candor, that I really suggest people read. It brings together a lot of things and a lot of practices that I think are really good, but it puts them all into one really nice framework, which is a great achievement by Kim Scott. So yeah, so that's another key aspect of what I look for in a product leader as well.
Okay. And now on the flip side, so if let's say I'm a product manager who's trying to, spread my wings and fly, I feel like I'm ready for a product leadership role, but my current circumstance does not allow it, or I don't have the opportunity to do it, because it sounds a lot like, as you go up the ladder, right, you tend to become more what's the word I'm looking for? There seems to be like a high importance on the soft skills. There's a more importance of learning how to adapt and how to speak, how to convey. So how would you then advise, let's say someone like me, if I'm saying that, hey, I wanna expand my scope and really get into that space of product leadership, what should I do?
Yeah, so this is something that we did at Seek Asia as well, is that as a product leader, I want to develop the leaders in my team as well.
Yes.
Like, it's super important, because I don't want to be doing all that work, right? I want to grow the people in my team so that they can do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I would start to invite them into key leadership meetings, right? So they might not attend, permanently as a permanent part of that meeting, but you would invite them in to present a particular topic, right, to the rest of the leadership team. And that's a great way of getting them sort of practicing some of those skills about presenting a particular initiative or a new set of key features that we've delivered, and exposing them to the rest of the leadership team as well. So that's something that you might try and talk to your boss about, right? So if you've got a product leader who is attending these types of meetings, have a conversation with them about maybe being invited into some of those meetings just to present, very specific pieces of work that the team is doing.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Please carry on.
Yeah, and then the other one is, as you become a product leader, you have to think about not only the product management skills, but you need to become a student of leadership itself, right? So I would really advise people to actually start reading different books about leadership. So there's a few, TED Talks, YouTube videos, and then there's a whole lot of podcasts, books, and I use Audible quite a lot, right? So I listen to a lot of these sort of books using Audible, because that means I can be doing two things at the same time, essentially. So there's lots of great leadership and management books out there. Become a student of leadership. Right? That's my other piece of advice.
Fantastic. All right, so I'm going to move on to something else. I know that actually I really wanted to chew on this with Ken a lot more, but I think I want to cover another aspect of what he has done, which I think is very interesting. So I also note that you are actually quite well versed with product design as well. So I've seen your talks in LTP about product design. I've spoken to you personally about product management and product design, and you seem to have a expertise in it in that sense, and that's not something that all product management leaders would have. And also in Seek Asia, you were taking the product design role and product management role. What would you say would be the key differences between product design and product manager? Just to put it out there to start that conversation.
The really only the difference is time, right? Your ability to focus on one thing at a time. So product management and design are almost the same, right? There's very, very little difference about the way that we are thinking about the customer and solving a customer problem with a great value proposition. And then from value proposition, you take that to, what are the options in terms of solutions. So product managers and designers are thinking exactly about the same things, but product managers just have to be much broader. We're not only thinking about the best solution, we're also thinking about other aspects of product operations, the engineering, the monetization model, metrics, all of these different aspects, and then pulling all of that together. Whereas the designer has a narrower focus. They can just focus on, is this a great product, right? So there's really not that much difference. Product management is design, and design is product management, right? It's just that you have the opportunity to spend more time thinking about it as a designer than you do as a product manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then the next question would be, once upon a time, getting C-level product people was new, right? Like CPOs are a relatively new concept in that sense. And then after that, now what we're seeing is you have CDOs as well, like chief design officers or chief, I think, experience officers, they call it now. So how does that work? Because if, let's say, design and product management are essentially sort of quite the same, but now they're both at the table, how does that work? And this is more curious because, again, within the companies that I've seen, it's not that common, but I would believe that this is going to be, the pun intended, the new normal as well. That you're going to have chief product officers and chief design officers or chief experience officers as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good trend, but I think it depends on the culture of the company and the level of maturity of that company as well, right? So if you're a startup, for example, and you're still looking for product market fit, maybe you're starting to, you're in the early stages of scaling, your focus is still very much on the product and the customer, right? Because you're just trying to grow, right? Super important. And in early stage companies, you might have several executives with that focus. So it's totally fine to have a CPO and a chief design officer or a chief customer experience officer, right? I think when you're a large, successful organization, your focus tends to be a bit broader because you've got to take in, a lot more sort of other aspects of the business, like scale, customer service, operations, all those other aspects of it as well. And there's a limit to how big your executive team can be, right? Before it becomes just unmanageable, right? So I think when you've got large, complex organizations with multiple business units and a lot more complexity, it's hard to have a lot of specialist executives on that team, and so just from a pragmatic purpose, I think it's less common with very large organizations, but I do see it becoming much more common with smaller organizations or small to medium organizations. Yeah.
Interesting. I would have thought that it would be more common in bigger organizations, given that they would have more complexities around the reporting matrix, and things like that. But you're thinking.
Yeah, I am starting to see it happen a little bit more often in large organizations, but maybe not at the CXO level, right?
Okay.
You might have a VP or a very senior executive, but maybe not a chief product officer and a chief design officer or CXO. It does happen, right? I do see larger organizations starting to become much more customer focused, and therefore you'll start to see more of these types of positions becoming available.
All right. So, and then one last question on this topic. So if, let's say, someone who started out in design, so it's very common to see a product manager sort of go up the ranks to hit the product management function, which includes design. But I'm also seeing the other trend where there are product designers who go up the ranks and then become product leads or heads of products, which include product management as well. So in your opinion, what must that person do if, let's say, they're coming from the other side of the coin to come up and lead the product team or the product practice?
Yeah, so a really interesting question. Let me think about that. I think I mentioned earlier, opening up that perspective, right, and broadening your aperture. I think that would be necessary as a designer as well, right? So design, you do have the benefit of being able to focus very sharply on the customer experience and making the product the best it can be. And I think if you are going to be, leading a product management team as well as a senior executive, then you do need to understand that broader perspective about, what is the key metrics of the business, understanding the data, understanding, the interaction between product and customer support or sales or other parts of the business. Yeah, so just taking on that broader perspective, I think would be absolutely necessary. But I've seen very effective design leaders becoming product leaders as well.
Yeah,
right?
I have as well, and it's just that I've read about some people write about how it's so different, and it'll be good to see because, like I said, you're one of the leaders who has a seeming passion for both product management and product design. So obviously, want to sort of pick your brains on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I love design so much as well is that it helps. It gives you a whole set of tools to talk about the customer and what we're trying to achieve on behalf of the customer. Like, what is the customer problem we're trying to solve? So frameworks like human-centered design, design thinking, jobs to be done, they're all great ways actually to talk about product strategy. Which is something that you're responsible for as a product leader. So yeah, it's a great set of tools for talking about those topics as well.
All right. So now let's from there move on to another aspect. So they say, well, when I say they, I'm talking about a lot of analysts and basically people in the industry who say that Southeast Asia is probably going to be the next most exciting place for tech companies and startups, right? And so obviously, as I've seen, and I think you've noticed, well, in fact, I think you've hired some of them as well, people from other countries coming to Southeast Asia to ply their trade within the product practice. So if let's say I am not from Southeast Asia, I want to find a job in Southeast Asia, experience that boom. What should I know beforehand? Like, what would your advice be?
Yeah, so working in Southeast Asia is a really interesting environment, right? So, so first of all, you've got a lot of diversity in the region, right? And because of that, you've got quite a lot of complexity. You've got markets like Indonesia, which are huge and have incredible growth potential, but tends to be a little bit behind, right? Behind markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, for example. Those are much smaller but wealthier markets, and they're more mature. And then you've got everything in between. You've got Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia, right? So it's quite a diverse range of markets that you're working with, and that level of complexity adds a lot of pain, but also a lot of fun, right? It's quite challenging working across different markets like that. There's also a lot of cultural diversity. So that's something that I encourage a lot in my teams. I like to hire teams that are very, very culturally diverse. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want any single country culture to dominate the behavior of the team, right? So for example, if you have a team full of Germans, they're going to operate in a very German way, right? If you have a team full of Italians, they're going to operate in a very Italian way. Similarly, if you have a team full of, Hong Kongers, they're going to operate in a very, certain way, dictated by their country cultures. Mm-hmm. If you've got a team of all sorts of people, we had people from Europe, we had people from Asia, Australia, in my team, we had people from all over the world. If you've got that level of diversity, there's no one single country culture that dominates. And that gives you as a leader, the opportunity to create your own culture, right? Within that team. And I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. All right.
In terms of, advice I'd give to people coming to Asia, you are going to have to be flexible. Things are going to be different. So, that kind of goes without saying. You are going to have to navigate some of these cultural traits of avoiding conflict, for example. How do you encourage that in your teams, but do it in a sensitive way that doesn't piss people off, basically. So you're going to have to be adaptable in terms of your behaviors. But I think one of the things that I look for in bringing a team together is that I want people who can bring some of that culture from other countries and other organizations into my team, because I find that super important as well.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that's great advice, because that's one of the things that does come up. So like recently I was in a panel that was talking about product management in Silicon Valley and Southeast Asia. And that was one of the questions, right? So if, let's say, they want to come, some product managers want to come over to Southeast Asia, what should they be prepared for? So I think that's really great advice. Now we're gonna go into some of the tougher topics before we close. Probably got another
Okay.
10 minutes. So you left Seek, right? And I'm very curious to know why did you leave Seek?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons, right? So one was that the plan was that I would move to Malaysia, my wife would come over, and then she would also settle down in KL, find a job, and we'd spend a bit more time in Asia. That kind of happened. She came over, she stayed here for 6 months, but she didn't really like any of the companies that she was interviewing with. So she's in digital marketing, right? She's in B2B lead generation and content marketing. And again, just the level of maturity for digital companies in Southeast Asia is lower than what you would find in Europe or the US. And therefore, she was just a little bit, unimpressed with the role descriptions and the level of responsibility that she could find in Malaysia. And so she decided, she really needed to pursue her career. And in order to do that, she would move back to London. So that kind of set the clock ticking for me to leave and to go back to London to join my family as well. So that was one of the key reasons. I think the other one was that, I had achieved a lot of things that I wanted to achieve at Seek Asia, and it was going through its own next phase of transformation as well. The Seek Asia business and the Seek ANZ business were also starting to come together. So I participated as part of that transformation, but I knew that also I wanted to be back in a role where I had full control over the product vision and the product strategy again as well, rather than be, just part of a large team of executives. Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you earlier, but now would be actually a better time to ask it, right, was when you stepped into this sort of like CPO role at a C level, it's a very senior level, right? What were the biggest things that you found different about, being, let's say, a product leader at a, let's say, I don't know, maybe director level versus at being a C level?
Yeah, there are a few differences. So one is that everyone's looking at you to lead, right? Mm-hmm. I think one of the interesting definitions of a leader is somebody that people are willing to follow, right? So you've got to earn the trust of an entire organization to be able to lead that organization and to influence that organization. So I certainly found myself doing a lot more stakeholder management with different parts of the business that I had no idea how they operate, mm-hmm. right? So that's a challenge. I think you need to broaden your perspective and widen that aperture. In order to understand other parts of the business. I think you're also exposed to a lot more corporate and business level strategy as well. So that, again, may be something that you're less familiar with. Fortunately, I had done some of that, when I was at BCG and in other organizations. So it wasn't totally unfamiliar to me, but again, it's different when you're kind of in it and in the thick of it, right? What else is different at C-level?
What about how much are you actually touching the product itself, right? Because from all accounts, it sounds like you're pretty much hands off, and your sole role is now really just to build the team, and manage upwards.
Yeah, that does change quite a lot, right? But it's not just at C-level. I think that already starts to happen when you're at head of and director level, right? You become more remote from the actual product itself, in terms of actually getting stuff built, and you have to do that through your teams and through your direct reports. So I think about it as your product is the product delivery organization, right?
Yes.
So yes, you're still responsible for the product vision and strategy, but you can't be directly involved in prioritizing user stories anymore. You have to do that at the next level up, right? You're prioritizing programs that might last 3 months up to 12 months perhaps. Right? And you're giving your teams enough air cover for them to be able to effectively do their jobs, right? So you're shielding them from a lot of the conversations and flip-flopping of priorities, so that they can actually just focus and get stuff done.
Okay.
I think that's a very important part of being a product leader as well.
Right. Very, very nice. All right. So, and what are your next steps then? Because you're now back in the UK. You're now enjoying the nice birds and no airplanes at the Heathrow.
Beautiful spring weather. So the plan was so I left Seek Asia in October last year, 2019. So my plan was to take 6 months off as a career break, and then come back to London and work on a startup or to find a job. Right, those were my two options. And then COVID-19 hit, right? So that's thrown some of my plans into turmoil a bit. I still have those two same options, but the idea that I had for a startup needs to pivot a little bit in order to be successful in this new sort of environment. And also, looking for my next opportunity here in London is taking a little bit longer than I expected as well, obviously, because, people are slowing down on hiring, and they're, really looking at saving their cash reserves so that they can just survive.
And I think also partly because of the seniority as well, the jobs are lesser to begin with. So obviously, plus COVID, so that means less and then lesser, right?
Yeah, I was actually still pleasantly surprised. I get contacted by people on a very regular basis.
Okay.
So there's still lots of opportunities there for senior product leaders. But I think because I took that time off, I had the opportunity to really think about what do I want for my next role? What do I enjoy? What do I not enjoy? And so I'm also being a bit more picky, because there are some things that I look for when I'm looking at a new role that are absolutely essential. So can I learn something from this job? Like, what am I going to learn? Who am I going to learn it from? Are the people there of a similar philosophy regarding, people, process, product, customer focus? And then can I have an impact? Like, can I be successful in this? Right. So there's a few different criteria, but also, do I actually like the product? Am I interested in this product? Right. So if it was a product for, I don't know, a SaaS platform for, tax reform or something, I'm not interested in that. So yeah, it is a product that I can relate to as a customer. Can I be passionate about it? Because I want to commit long term to a product, right, and to a team. So yeah, you don't want to be switching roles every couple of years.
Nice. All right, so let's get on to the final part of the show. So I asked you to choose a song that you would recommend to the listeners of the Product Uncensored show, a song that would sort of, would visualize yourself in song in that sense. And you chose a very interesting song. You chose, is it called Visage?
Yeah, so the band is Visage. The song is Fade to Grey. And there's a bit of a story about this. So for people who know me well, I'm a big fan of techno music, right? That's probably why I love Berlin so much. Big fan of techno. It dominates my music listening in terms of the stuff that I listen to. But I love a whole lot of songs, so it was hard to pick this one. But I think techno is my favorite, and I was trying to figure out, like, where did that begin? Like, what started all of this? So I was flipping through my iPhone, my iTunes libraries, and I was thinking, what is the earliest song that I remember that I absolutely loved, which was from this genre? And it turns out that it was late 1980. I was about 13 years old, just going to high school. And it was Fade to Grey by Visage. It's one of the earliest kind of synth pop new wave bands out of the UK. You know, I grew up in Australia, so everyone was listening to like Jimmy Barnes, Cold Chisel, INXS, you know, those like...
No Duran Duran fans at that time?
No, Duran Duran wasn't around at the time.
Wow. That much earlier, huh?
This is pre-Duran Duran and any of those bands. You know, that was the sort of the mid-80s.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of my love of techno music.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I tried listening to the song and checking out the lyrics, and it's got like what, French in there?
Yeah.
So what's the song about?
No, it's just a really interesting. I actually don't really know what the song's about, but I just remember it being like the earliest song that I absolutely loved.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking about lyrics. I'm not entirely sure what the song's about.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, it's just so it also sounds like, just like the first guest that I had on the show, you're a more melody rhythm guy than lyrics guy. Would that be fair, or is it just for the song that?
No, I think lyrics are important, but it's just such an old song. I don't remember the story behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you also chose a video that was a rare video rather than the official video that came from Visage, actually.
Yeah.
Is any reason for that?
It was just aesthetically more pleasing. The actual official released video was just kind of weird.
Yes, I was going to say, if you're going for the shock factor, the official video would have done it, right? So,
yeah. Look, you have to remember, at the time, the synthesizer was a new musical instrument, right?
Oh.
Before that, it was all, you know, traditional rock band guitars and drums kind of stuff.
So rock and roll and.
So this predates all of that kind of music, and it was an entirely new sound, right? So people were very experimental at the time. They were really trying to, you know, look at weird new formats for expressing themselves, not only in the music, but also in the music videos as well. So it is kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you guys, I'll let you listeners decide which one you like. At the end of the video, obviously, I will post a link to the song that Ken has just mentioned. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much, Ken, for taking the time to be on the show. I'm waking up early as well, because I know it's like, what now? It's like 10 a.m. there, right?
Yeah, it's 10 a.m. It's not
that early, but still.
Late. Not that early.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on the show. I wish you all the best in, you know, your next steps, and hopefully one day we'll see you back in Asia, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. You never know.
Yeah, so again, thank you very much. And yeah, so if you've enjoyed today's show, please, again, as I mentioned, like the video, subscribe, or if you're listening to the podcast, please download, follow. And also, if you want to find out more about Product Uncensored, please visit our website at www.productuncensored.com. We have some writings there as well. Well, we at the moment, it's just me. But yeah, I write about Southeast Asia product management as well. That's all for today, and we'll see you next time.